A shoebox in the back of a closet in Dayton, Ohio, still wrapped in tissue paper. The name stamped on the lid in gold script reads, Energetic. The woman who bought those shoes has been gone for 20 years, but the leather is still soft, still holds the shape of her foot. These are 10 shoe brands every woman in America trusted from the 1940s through the 60s. Not one of them survived. And the reason they vanished is the part nobody talks about. Number 10. Energetics. A comfort shoe for women sold from the 1920s through the early 1960s. The slogan said it plainly. You need no longer be told that you have an expensive foot. Made in Auburn, New York. Available in widths from quadruple A to triple E. Priced around $4 to $6 a pair. The name stamped in gold on the inside of the shoe. Energetic had its own dedicated shops in cities across the country. Radio advertisements ran on NBC as early as 1929. Eleanor Roosevelt wore them and said so publicly. The leather was soft but structured. The fighty was the point. A woman with a wide foot or a narrow foot or a foot that had never once fit comfortably into a standard shoe could walk into an energetic store and be measured and fitted without apology. A woman with a difficult foot in that era was told she was a problem. Energetic told her she was worth fitting. That message vanished when the brand did, but fit was only half the equation. The next brand solved the other half, and every woman who ever stood on her feet for a living remembers the name. Number 9. AAR Step, a women's shoe line made by Brown Shoe Company of St. Louis, known for something called the Magic Sole. The Magic Sole was a layer of foam rubber sealed between the insole and the outsole. You could not see it. You could only feel it. Retailed around $6 to $9. Advertised heavily in Life magazine and Ladies' Home Journal. The ads showed a cutaway drawing of the shoe with the hidden cushion glowing inside like a secret. Came in pumps, flats, and low heels. The leather was domestic calf skin, smooth and cool to the touch. The box had an illustration of a woman walking on a cloud. She stood behind a department store counter for 8 hours a day. She rang up purchases and smiled at strangers, and her feet carried every minute of it. She could not sit down. She could not take her shoes off. She needed a shoe that would meet her halfway through a 10-hour shift on a hard floor. Airstep understood that comfort was not a luxury for a working woman. It was survival. Number 8. Capezio. Originally a dance shoe company founded in 1887 on Broadway in New York City. In the 1950s, Capezio ballet flats crossed from the rehearsal studio into everyday American fashion. Salvatore Capezio was an Italian immigrant cobbler who opened his shop near the old Metropolitan Opera House. The ballet flat retailed around $3 to $5. Soft, unstructured leather with a sole thin enough to feel the sidewalk through. Claire McCardle, the great American sportswear designer, put Capezio flats on fashion runways and into the pages of Vogue. Audrey Hepburn wore them in Funny Face. College girls bought them in black and wore them with capri pants and oversized sweaters on campuses from Vassar to Berkeley. A flat shoe with no heel and no arch support that made a woman feel like she was dancing down the pavement. No advertising budget made that shoe famous. Grace did. Number 7. Queen Quality. A women's dress shoe made by International Shoe Company in St. Louis. One of the most widely sold mid-priced dress shoes of the 1940s and 50s. Priced around $5 to $7. Sold in nearly every Main Street shoe store in America. The name stamped on the sole in a flowing cursive script. Calfskin uppers, leather soles, Cuban heels, available in black, navy, and cordovan. The shoe a woman wore to church on Easter morning, to a funeral in November, to a job interview at the telephone company. International Shoe Company was the largest shoe manufacturer in the world during this period, and Queen Quality was one of its proudest lines. The name said what the shoe promised. A working-class woman could walk into any room and know her feet looked right. When International Shoe became Interco and chased conglomerate profits in the 1970s, Queen Quality was one of the first names they buried. Queen Quality dressed a woman for public life, but the next brand dressed her daughter for the moment she first stepped into it. Number 6. Deliso Debs, a fashion-forward women's shoe line marketed to younger women in the late 1940s and through the 50s, produced by Samuel's Shoe Company of St. Louis, designed in collaboration with Palter Deliso. Higher price point, $8 to $12 a pair. Featured in Vogue and Harper's Bazaar. Slim silhouettes, pointed toes, kitten heels in jewel tones. Patent leather in cherry red and midnight blue. The shoe a young woman bought with her first real paycheck from her first real job. Window displays at Bonwit Teller and Lord & Taylor in Manhattan. The tissue paper rustling inside the box. The click of a new heel on a lobby floor. Deliso Debs was not her mother's shoe. It was the shoe that told her she had arrived somewhere her mother had not been. The brand disappeared, but the feeling of lifting the lid off that first box never did. These shoes were not made in anonymous overseas factories. They were made by companies that employed entire towns. Auburn, New York, St. Louis, Missouri, Portsmouth, Ohio, Lynn, Massachusetts. The American shoe industry at its peak employed over 200,000 workers in small cities and mill towns across the country. A girl graduated high school on Friday and started at the shoe factory on Monday. Her father worked the cutting floor. Her mother worked the stitching line. The paycheck bought a house and a car and Christmas presents. When the brands disappeared, the paychecks disappeared. The main streets went quiet. The storefronts went dark. Today, you can drive through some of those towns and not find a single store selling shoes that were made there. That is not nostalgia. That is economic history written in boarded-up windows. Number 5, Naturalizer, a women's comfort shoe brand launched by Brown Shoe Company in 1927. The name still exists today, but the original shoe and the shoe sold now share nothing but the label. Built around a patented 5-point FIT plan that addressed the arch, the heel, the ball, the instep, and the toe. Retailed around $5 to $8. Full grain leather. Ads in Good Housekeeping showed X-ray photographs of a woman's foot inside the shoe, proving the fit was anatomical. Trained clerks measured both feet because most people have one foot slightly larger than the other. The shoe was shaped to the foot, not the other way around. The name promised something radical, a shoe built around the natural shape of a human foot. That original promise was quietly abandoned when production moved offshore and costs were cut to the bone. The name survived. The shoe did not. Naturalizer tried to make a shoe that understood the foot. The next brand went further. It tried to make a shoe that would last as long as the woman wearing it. Number 4, Selby Shoes, a women's shoe brand headquartered in Portsmouth, Ohio, famous for the Selby Arch Preserver. One of the most trusted names in American women's footwear from the 1930s through the 70s, the Arch Preserver featured a built-in steel shank and a metatarsal pad that supported the foot from underneath. Retailed around $7 to $10, hand-lasted on American lasts, the factory in Portsmouth employed over 1,000 workers at its peak. Full leather construction with a Goodyear welt, the same method used on fine men's shoes. A Selby could be resold 3 or 4 times. Women kept them for years. She did not throw that shoe away when the sole wore through. She took it to the cobbler on 2nd Street and had it fixed. She did this 2 or 3 times over the life of one pair. A shoe built to be repaired is a shoe made by people who expected you to keep it. Today, the average American woman buys 7 pairs of shoes a year. Most of them end up in a landfill within 12 months. That expectation of keeping does not exist anymore. Number 3, Red Cross Shoes, one of the most popular women's shoe brands in America from the 1920s through the 1960s. In 1942, during World War II, the U.S. government and the American Red Cross restricted the commercial use of the name, forcing a temporary name change. Decades later, the brand was officially renamed Capezio and Selby lines under U.S. Shoe and eventually phased out. The product had not changed. Not the leather, not the construction, not the fit. Only the name on the box. 40 years of trust, built one pair at a time, erased by illegal filing. The shoes did not fail. The name was simply taken. And 1 million women who had reached for that box by instinct had to start reaching for something else. Red Cross Shoes lost its name and its customers followed. But the next brand did not lose its name. It lost something harder to replace. Number 2, I. Miller. A luxury women's shoe retailer and manufacturer founded in 1898 in New York City. The Fifth Avenue flagship was considered the most beautiful shoe store in America. Israel Miller was an immigrant cobbler from Eastern Europe who built a company that dressed Broadway actresses and Park Avenue socialites. The store at 562 Fifth Avenue. Shoes priced from $12 to $30, serious money in that era. In the early 1950s, a young, unknown commercial artist named Andy Warhol drew their newspaper advertisements. Delicate ink drawings of women's shoes that ran weekly in the New York Times. The window displays changed every week and pedestrians gathered on the sidewalk just to look. Custom fittings by hand. Leather imported from Italy. And alongside the socialites, a secretary who had saved 6 weeks of pay to buy one perfect pair. A cobbler's son built the most elegant shoe store in the richest city in the world. A young artist nobody recognized drew the ads. The store closed. The artist became Andy Warhol. The shoes became landfill. The only surviving trace of I. Miller is the artwork. Every one of these brands was started by someone who made shoes. A cobbler, a factory hand, a man or a woman who understood leather because they had cut it with their own hands. They were not started by holding companies or private equity groups. They were started by people who stood in the same rooms where the shoes were stitched. When ownership passed to people who had never touched a last or smelled fresh tanned leather, the product changed. Not because the materials changed, because the intention did. Number 1, Johansen. A women's shoe brand made in St. Louis, known for impeccable construction at mid-range prices. For decades, the name Johansen on the inside of the box meant something specific to American women. It meant quality that did not need to explain itself. Founded by Chris Johansen, a Danish immigrant who learned shoemaking in the old country and brought the craft to Missouri. Full leather uppers and soles, hand-finished edges, retailed around $6 to $10, sold through independent shoe stores where the clerk knew your name and remembered your size from last time. Not a chain, not a warehouse, a store with a bell on the door and a man who shook your hand, a Johansen pump in black calf, the weight of it in your hand before you even tried it on, the clean stitching along the welt, the sole that darkened and softened with wear instead of cracking and peeling, a shoe that looked better after 6 months than it did the day it came out of the box. A man crossed an ocean and built a shoe company that dressed a generation of American women. His name was on every pair. That name was a promise, and for 40 years he kept it. Then the company was sold. The factory closed. The name went into a drawer and never came back out. And 1 million women who had walked into a store and simply said the name had to start explaining what they wanted all over again. That was the real cost, not the shoes, the trust. And if you want more forgotten wisdom from the generations who came before us, the next video is waiting for you right now.